You have to look at the candidates for who's going to get things like National Security Advisor, head of CIA, Secretary of State, and Secretary of Defense. And then when you know who those are and you know their views, you know what Donald Trump, you have a better idea of what he's going to do, because he's going to appoint people that will carry out what he wants to do.
President Putin has sent his congratulations to President-elect Trump in his first comments since the election. He says that Trump's promise to end the war deserves attention. And what does that mean, of course, for the war in Ukraine? The foreign affairs expert Tim Marshall, who is the author of Prisoners of Geography, joins me now. Welcome to the show.
Very good morning.
Well, can you tell us what's going to happen, Tim? I mean, nobody really knows.
We know the broad outlines, and we know what will probably happen in broad brush strokes. It's when you get down to detail. And one of the things, it's a little bit process and not too exciting, but you have to look at the candidates for who's going to get things like National Security Advisor, head of CIA, Secretary of State, and Secretary of Defense. And then when you know who those are and you know their views, you know what Donald Trump, you have a better idea of what he's going to do, because he's going to appoint people that will carry out what he wants to do. So, for example, on Ukraine, which is a pretty big item in his inbox, he clearly says he's going to end the war. He's got a couple of guys who are lined up for top jobs, Keith Kellogg and Fred Fleitz. And they put together the plan they presented to him this summer for Ukraine, which is in broad brush terms. You go to Zelensky in Ukraine, you say, get yourself to that negotiating table or we'll cut all aid off. You then go to Putin, you say, get yourself to that negotiating table or we'll double the aid to Ukraine. It, sounds, what could possibly go wrong with that? So one way or another, he intends to end it. I suspect it's going to be a reduction in aid to Ukraine. If that happens, the Europeans in no way can make up the deficit. It's more than half of what Ukraine gets. Therefore, Ukraine has a choice. We fight on with almost both hands tied behind our back now and lose, or we go to the table in a weak position.
And so, and the deal on the table will be to freeze the conflict, to freeze the current front lines. So in effect, Russia annexes a third of Ukraine.
Yep, that's pretty much it. And also you freeze any suggestion of NATO membership. Now, Russia would love this. It would go down as a win. I personally think it would go down as a loss for NATO, which has knock-on effects for things, well, elsewhere in the world, notably Taiwan. But yeah, that does appear to be it. And what would Ukraine have to come back with? What can it say? As I said, it seems to me, looking at the weapons supply and the amount of money and all the rest of it, that if they're not getting it, you lose even more territory eventually. The population is absolutely exhausted. They have, I think it's something like a fifth of the manpower that Russia can throw at this. So they're pretty nervous in Ukraine at the moment.
Is there any silver lining? It's probably a terrible phrase to use, but is there any silver lining that one could take from, say,
there's a temporary one, and the temporary one is that the killing stops.
Well,
but
yes, that is true. But in terms of geopolitics in Europe,
I don't know. Well,
presidency, the line would stay there. There's no risk of Russia attacking other countries. Moldova springs to mind, and others.
No, I don't think that's a silver lining. But the only silver lining is that the killing stops for now. But even with the deal, in the very broad brush terms we've outlined, I still think Russia comes back for more in 5 to 10 years. So, okay, if you want to have a silver lining, the Europeans finally wake up, smell the coffee, come back from their holiday from history that they've been on for 20, 30 years now, and sadly, increase their defense budgets and start organizing the defense of Europe.
And there's been some talk of perhaps the new administration saying to the Europeans, we're freezing the conflict, we're freezing the front line, and we want Europe to supply troops to police it. Is that feasible?
Yes. And let's face it, there are some very able European militaries, Poland, France, the UK, Swedes, for example, but they're not joined up enough. They don't have enough munitions, and they don't have the willpower yet. There's still not enough of them that yet will embrace the reality, which has always been blindingly obvious, is that without the Americans, we cannot defend ourselves. So they would have to have a sea change in their thinking and then admit this to the European publics, that we've been asleep at the wheel for decades. I mean, Trump's not the first US president to tell the Europeans to get their act together. Obama called us all freeloaders.
Yeah, and I think Kennedy even told us to increase our defense budget. Finally, what does this do in terms of the European Union and the US? Because it emboldens some of the pro-Russian members, such as Hungary, presumably, who will potentially...
Yeah, Viktor Orban will be in Budapest celebrating this as well. He's one of the few European leaders that will be sanguine about it. I mean, what's coming down the line, probably not in the first year, is a form of trade war. We'll see how bad it is. But Trump administration will deal with China trade as a priority and then turn its attention to Europe. He's talking about 10% tariffs on all goods, maybe, or it may be scattergun targeting certain industries. The UK, interestingly, will be able to negotiate in isolation, splendid isolation, you could almost say, because obviously it's not in the EU. So whilst the EU is going to have to negotiate as a bloc on trade to try and escape this 10% tariff threat, the UK might be in a position to say, well, if we do A, would you do B for us? It's all coming down the line, but it is all going to happen. I think he means most of what he says.
So we have a very good relationship, and I also have a very good relationship, as you know, with President Putin. And I think if we win, I think we're going to get it resolved very quickly. I really think we're going to get it resolved.
I hope we have more good relations.
We're going to have. Oh, I see. Yeah. But,
nice to be with you. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. President Putin and I have been discussing various things, and I think it's going very well. We've had some very, very good talks. We're going to have a talk now, and obviously that will continue. But we look forward to a lot of very positive things happening for Russia, for the United States, and for everybody concerned. And it's an honor to be with you. Thank you. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, sir.